Predator's End. Part 1. The Hunters Shad. They say every man carries the seeds of his own destruction. Mine flourished in the shadow of the woman I loved, watered by my blind trust, and fertilized with 15 years of combat instinct. I tried to bury beneath forest green uniforms and conservation reports. My name is Ethan Blackwood, 36 years old, ex-Delta Force operator turned senior ranger at Ravens Peak Wildlife Reserve. And this is the story of how I hunted the hunters. The fatting light. I rise before dawn, always. 15 years in Delta Force burned this habit into my brain so deep that civilian life couldn't erase it. 4:30 in the morning while Vanessa sleeps, I'm already lacing my tactical boots, the only piece of military gear I couldn't surrender. The ranger uniform for Ravens Peak sits on my frame like second skin. Tactical vest with its constellation of pockets, field jacket, khaki pants, almost like the military, minus the camouflage and rank insignia. The mountain cabin's porch creaks beneath my weight as I inhale the pre-dawn air, sharp as a blade against my lungs. Dr. Mitchell always said nature and routine were the best medicine for combat syndrome. Silence will heal those wounds invisible to the eye, Ethan, he'd repeat. Mitchell was a good doc, but he never ventured into places I'd been. Silence doesn't heal. Silence only makes the screams living in your skull sound clearer. My Remington 700 rests against my shoulder, civilian issue, but my hand remembers the weight of my M4A1, with which I spent more time than with my own wife. Patrol route number 4, 10 miles through the northeastern sector of the reserve. I check my GPS more from habit than necessity. After 6 months on the job, I've come to know this forest better than the lines etching themselves deeper around my eyes each day. The sun still sleeps when I spot the first signs of poachers. Fresh tracks, less than a day old. Next to the imprints of hunting boots lie empty shells from .308 caliber rounds. The poachers grow bolder, using high-powered weapons within spitting distance of the tourist zone. I photograph the tracks, mark coordinates, collect casings in a plastic bag. Everything by instruction, everything by protocol. Discipline and order, the last remaining pieces of my former life. By 3 o'clock, I complete my patrol and return to our cabin. Vanessa isn't home. A note on the refrigerator reads, "Gone shopping in town, back late." Love V. Her handwriting, usually meticulous, appears rushed. I check the kitchen cabinets. They're fully stocked with canned goods and grains. The refrigerator harbors fresh vegetables and meat. What shopping could possibly consume an entire day in a town with one supermarket? I clean my rifle, check work emails, prepare my patrol report. Movements mechanical, perfected, requiring no thought. At 6, the sound of an engine breaks the silence. Vanessa's German sedan stops by the porch. She emerges, elegant even in simple jeans, carrying a single shopping bag. "Find what you were looking for?" I ask, opening the door. "Had to drive to several stores," she answers, not meeting my eyes. "Couldn't find the face cream I usually buy." Vanessa kisses my cheek, a fleeting, ritualistic touch. She smells not only of her perfume but something else. Male cologne. She brushes past me into the bedroom where she spends half an hour in the shower. When she emerges, the foreign scent has vanished. Over dinner, we speak of trivialities. A movie she watched last week. My findings in the forest. Plans for the weekend. Surface-level conversation between two people inhabiting the same house but living in parallel dimensions. I try to remember when we last really talked, but memory offers only dry facts, not emotions. Dreams come at night, as always. Dastak, Afghanistan, 2008. Our strike team enters a compound where intelligence places a high-ranking Taliban leader. Too quiet. I signal to stop, but Sergeant Garcia doesn't see it in the darkness and takes another step. The booby trap activates instantly. Blinding flash, thunderous boom, and Garcia is gone. I watch his dog tags, covered in blood and tissue, fall at my feet. I wake gasping, a scream trapped in my throat. Sheets drenched with sweat, heart hammering like a caged animal against my ribs. Vanessa sleeps, or pretends to sleep, on her side of the bed, back turned toward me. I carefully rise to avoid disturbing her and walk to the kitchen. Cold water from the tap helps anchor me to reality. I step onto the porch. 3 a.m. moonlight bathes the forest in silver. In moments like these, I almost understand why my psychologist prescribed nature as medicine. Almost. The first encounter. A week passes in what resembles routine. I patrol the forest. Vanessa regularly leaves for shopping. We barely speak, but that's nothing new. Our marriage long ago transformed into a partnership of cohabitation. On Tuesday, I check a remote section of the reserve where tourists reported seeing a bear. Instead of bear tracks, I find prints from expensive hunting boots and casings from automatic weapons. Not ordinary casings from hunting rifles, casings from combat weapons. 56 times 45 mm NATO. I know this ammunition type like my own heartbeat, standard rounds for M16s and M4s. Illegal weapons constitute a serious violation requiring immediate response. I follow the tracks, all senses heightened to maximum. The familiar weight of body armor I'm not wearing presses against my chest like a phantom. My finger settles on the trigger with practiced ease, though I'm merely a ranger now, not a special forces operator. I hear their voices before seeing their owners. Male, confident, with that particular timbre that belongs only to people accustomed to giving orders and unused to refusal. A group of 5 positioned in a small clearing. 4 premium-class SUVs lined up at the forest's edge, violating another reserve regulation. My appearance doesn't surprise them. A tall man in a custom-tailored hunting suit smiles as I approach. His eyes hold the cold curiosity of a coroner examining an interesting specimen under the microscope. "And here comes the local authority," he says, making a slight gesture to stop his companions from reaching for their weapons. "The forest ranger in person." I examine their arsenal, modified M4s with optical sights, suppressors, and grenade launchers. Weapons for warfare, not hunting. Raven's Peak Wildlife Reserve. I introduce myself officially. Senior Ranger Ethan Blackwood, you're in a restricted area with prohibited vehicles and unregistered firearms. I'll have to confiscate your weapons and issue a fine. One of the tall man's companions, a bald hulk with a square jaw, steps forward, but the leader stops him with a glance. Maxwell Harrington, the tall man introduces himself, extending a hand that I deliberately ignore. "I'm afraid there's been a slight misunderstanding, Mr. Blackwood. We have all the necessary permits." He removes a folded document with stamps and signatures from his jacket's breast pocket. A quick glance confirms it is indeed a hunting permit for the reserve, signed by the state commissioner. But no commissioner has the authority to permit military-grade weapons. "This doesn't extend to combat weapons," I state firmly. "Please surrender your firearms and leave the reserve immediately." Harrington studies me with undisguised curiosity. "You know your weapons, Mr. Blackwood. Interesting." He pauses, examining me with a gaze that seems too penetrating. "I see military bearing, Marines. No, something more, specialized." I silently extend my hand, demanding the weapons. Harrington sighs. "Very well, Mr. Blackwood, we'll comply. No need to create conflict." He nods to his companions, who, to my surprise, obediently place their weapons at my feet. 6 rifles worth at least $100,000 on the black market. "I trust you'll provide a confiscation receipt," Harrington says with a slight smile. "My lawyer will insist on observing all formalities." I notice one of his men discreetly photographing me on his phone, including my name badge. "Of course," I reply, taking out my notebook, "and you'll have to pay a substantial fine for violating reserve regulations." "Certainly, Mr. Blackwood," Harrington agrees with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Money is just paper, but experiences are priceless." He surveys the forest around us with the expression of an owner inspecting his property. "We'll meet again, Mr. Blackwood," he says, climbing into his SUV. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." His voice sounds not like a threat but a statement of fact. The last of the jeeps disappears around the bend, leaving me alone with a pile of confiscated weapons. Only now do I notice my hand unconsciously gripping the rifle in combat-ready position. Old habits die hard. That evening, I turn over the confiscated weapons to the county sheriff, Jake Colton, the 50-year-old police veteran with an eternally flushed face and the scent of cheap whiskey whistles as he examines the arsenal. "Sweet Jesus, Ethan, you detained Maxwell Harrington." He shakes his head. "Son, you've either got balls of steel or a complete absence of self-preservation instinct." "Who is he?" I ask, watching as the sheriff carelessly stacks the rifles in the weapons locker. "Maxwell Harrington," Colton pronounces with a mixture of respect and fear, "is one of the wealthiest men in the state. Investments, real estate, technology, he's got interests everywhere, and connections from the district judge to the governor. That doesn't give him the right to hunt with military weapons in the reserve," I reply. The sheriff looks at me with pity, like a naive child. "Listen, son, there are rules written on paper and there's reality. Men like Harrington live by their own rules." He pats my shoulder. "Do yourself a favor, don't stand in his way. That's my friendly advice." The betrayal. The Charity Gala supporting Ravens Peak Wildlife Reserve takes place once a year at the Pine Haven Town Club. I usually avoid such events, but this time the reserve director insisted that all senior staff attend. An important sponsor is expected, ready to allocate significant funds for a new endangered species conservation program. My suit feels like a straitjacket. The stiff collar chafes my neck, the tie presses against my throat, creating a sensation of suffocation. Vanessa, in contrast, blooms in the atmosphere of social gathering. In a black evening gown with a deep back cut, styled hair and professional makeup, she looks like she did in the days when she graced fashion shows in New York. For the first time in a long while, I feel a surge of pride that this woman is my wife. The reception is in full swing when I hear a familiar laugh. Vanessa, who 10 minutes ago went for champagne, stands in the center of a group of men but looks at only one. Maxwell Harrington, in an impeccable tuxedo, appears like a Hollywood version of a successful businessman. His hand rests on my wife's waist in a gesture that exceeds the boundaries of simple, friendly familiarity. They notice my approach too late. In Vanessa's eyes flashes poorly concealed panic, which she quickly masks with a smile. "Ethan," she exclaims too loudly. "Meet Mr. Harrington, a longtime friend and sponsor of my shows. Maxwell, this is my husband, Ethan Blackwood." Harrington doesn't look surprised. On the contrary, his eyes register satisfaction, as if he's been waiting for this moment. "Mr. Blackwood, what a pleasant surprise," he says, extending his hand. "Your wife has told me so much about you." This time I accept the handshake. Refusing would seem childish in such a setting. His palm is dry and firm, with calluses on the index finger and base of the thumb, characteristic signs of someone who regularly fires a pistol. "Vanessa and I have known each other for many years," Harrington continues, holding my hand longer than etiquette requires. "When she mentioned you'd moved to our quiet corner, I couldn't help but offer my support to the reserve." Vanessa nervously adjusts her hair, a gesture I recognize as a sign of her anxiety. "Maxwell has made a generous donation to the wolf population restoration program," she says, avoiding my gaze. "Your wife is a true treasure, Mr. Blackwood," Harrington says with a provocative smile as he kisses Vanessa's hand, and I notice a platinum bracelet with a small engraving on her wrist. She's full of surprises. I read the inscription on the bracelet, "To my huntress." "Where did you get this bracelet?" I ask Vanessa when Harrington walks away to greet the mayor. "It's just a gift," she answers, nervously covering the bracelet with her sleeve. "Please don't make a scene. He helped me early in my career. It's just a token of gratitude." A token of gratitude, I repeat, feeling something cold constricting inside me. "To my huntress, what does that mean, Vanessa?" "Nothing," she snaps. "It's just a phrase, a metaphor for photo shoots. Hunting for the perfect shot, you understand. Industry slang." I look at her, the woman I've lived with for 7 years, and don't recognize her. As if a mask has slipped, revealing a stranger's face. "How long?" I ask quietly. "How long what?" Her voice sounds weary. "How long have you been seeing him?" Vanessa looks at me, with a mixture of irritation and pity. "We're not seeing each other, Ethan. He's my friend and mentor. Not all relationships between men and women reduce to intimacy." She pauses. "Though if you paid me even a tenth of the attention you give to your nightmares and rifle, perhaps I wouldn't need to seek companionship elsewhere." Her words hit their mark perfectly. I know I haven't been an ideal husband. PTSD, night terrors, constant internal tension, all this affected our relationship. But infidelity, or wasn't it? How should I understand this? "Let's go home," I say, feeling the conversation spiraling out of control. "No, Ethan," Vanessa firmly replies. "I'm staying. This is the first evening in many months when I feel alive, not in the company of dead trees and your ghosts." She walks away, gracefully navigating between guests. A minute later, I see her next to Harrington, who whispers something in her ear, making her laugh. I step onto the terrace, needing fresh air and silence. But even here there's no peace. Two men smoke, conversing quietly. "Disappeared 2 weeks ago," one says. "Just vanished. The police aren't exactly breaking a sweat. Another city activist who stuck his nose where it doesn't belong." "Harper was always a pain in the ass," replies the second. "But his protests against Harrington's project could only end one way." I tense up, hearing the familiar surname. "Harper, Alex Harper?" I ask, approaching the men. They look at me warily. "You know him?" asks the first. "Heard of him," I reply evasively. "He led the campaign against the resort construction at the reserve boundaries, right?" "Yes, and now he's missing," the second man makes air quotes. "Right after he collected enough signatures to initiate public hearings about Harrington's project." "You think Harrington—" I don't finish the question. The men exchange glances. "We don't think anything, officer," says the first, noticing my reserve staff badge. "And we advise you not to either. Walls have ears around here." They leave, abandoning me with new questions and growing concern. The body. 3 days later, I patrol the distant northern border of the reserve. This route rarely appears in regular patrols, too remote from tourist trails, too inaccessible. But I need solitude and silence to sort through the whirlwind of thoughts about Vanessa Harrington and the strange disappearance of Alex Harper. An unnatural smell catches my attention, a sharp, metallic taste of death, too familiar to anyone who's been in combat zones. I quicken my pace, following the scent upstream. The body lies in the shallow water of a small waterfall, partially hidden by overhanging willow branches. Lividity and decomposition indicate death occurred at least a week ago. I carefully turn the body over and feel a wave of cold fury rising within me. It's Alex Harper. His face remains recognizable despite water damage. But that's not what draws my attention. I see multiple entry wounds from bullets of different calibers, signs of torture. And most importantly, almost no blood in the wounds, indicating the body was placed in water after death. A soaked notebook protrudes from Harper's jacket pocket. I carefully extract it, trying not to damage the pages. Inside, coordinates, dates, names, and among them Maxwell Harrington's name, circled several times with the notation, "Connection to disappearances." I activate emergency communications, calling the county police. An hour later, Sheriff Colton arrives with 2 deputies and a medical examiner. They all look displeased at having to climb into such remote terrain. "So where's your corpse, Blackwood?" Colton grumbles, breathing heavily after the ascent. I point to the body. The sheriff briefly examines it, showing almost no interest. "Looks like an accident," he pronounces, not even trying to hide his indifference. "City nature lover, got lost, fell, maybe was drunk." "Sheriff," I say, struggling to contain my indignation, "this is clearly murder. Multiple gunshot wounds, signs of torture." "You see what you want to see, Blackwood," Colton interrupts me. "These injuries are from the fall and being in water. Forest animals did their part too." "But sir, look at the bullet entry holes." "Enough," the sheriff raises his voice. "I'm not new to police work, son. This is a hunting accident. Harper was at fault wandering through the forest without permission, possibly even poaching. And whatever injuries he has, the medical examiner will determine that, not you." "Sheriff," I try to object, "we need to collect evidence, take photographs of the scene." "Enough, Blackwood," Colton cuts me off. "This is police business, not Forest Service. Get back to your trees and bears." I watch as Harper's body is carelessly packed into a plastic bag, as potential evidence gets destroyed. The sheriff intercepts my gaze and approaches closer. "Listen, son," he says quietly but firmly. "Don't meddle in things that don't concern you. Some things in this world just are what they are. Smart people accept this and continue living. Stubborn fools, well, they tend to join Mr. Harper. You understand me?" I nod, not trusting my voice. I understand too well. Corruption, fear, the mutually beneficial symbiosis of power and money, everything I'd hoped to escape by moving to this remote location. The horrifying discovery. In the following days, I can't shake thoughts of Harper's body and the sheriff's strange behavior. Something nags at me, something beyond ordinary corruption. Vanessa continues to disappear for entire days, returning late in the evening. She no longer bothers inventing excuses. We barely speak. The solution comes unexpectedly. At a military surplus store in the neighboring town, I purchase 5 disguised surveillance cameras, high-tech devices used to track wildlife, but capable of recording high-definition video even in complete darkness. Over 2 days, I install them at different points throughout the reserve, especially in places where I found traces of illegal hunting. A week later, I check the recordings. The first 3 cameras show nothing interesting, ordinary wildlife, a couple of poachers with standard hunting rifles. The 4th camera captured a group of tourists who strayed from the official route. The 5th camera, installed in the most remote part of the reserve, delivers shocking footage. On video, a group of armed men hunting a person through the forest. I recognize Maxwell Harrington, dressed in expensive camouflage, and several of his guests, businessmen, politicians, even a famous actor. Their victim, a homeless man whom I've seen begging outside the town supermarket. With growing horror, I watch as the group corners the man like a wild animal. They don't shoot to kill, instead enjoying the chase, methodically cutting off all escape routes. The final scene unfolds in a small clearing, where the trapped man, bleeding from several non-lethal wounds, begs for mercy. Harrington approaches him, with an expression of almost arousal on his face. "That was an excellent hunt, my friend. You lasted longer than most, but all good things must end." He makes a sign, and a female figure emerges from behind the trees. My heart stops. Vanessa, my wife, dressed in a black form-fitting hunting suit with a silenced pistol in hand. Her movements are graceful and confident, her eyes shining with thirst and excitement I never witnessed in our bedroom. "My turn," she says in a voice I barely recognize. The homeless man is bound, placed on his knees. Vanessa approaches from behind, places the pistol to the back of his head. Her hand doesn't tremble. "Exquisite, my dear. You've outdone yourself," Harrington says with undisguised admiration. A shot, execution style, professional, as taught in special units. The victim's body falls lifelessly to the ground. Harrington approaches Vanessa and kisses her. She responds as if the act of killing has become a source of pleasure for her. The recording ends. I sit paralyzed, unable to process what I've seen. My wife, my Vanessa, a killer, a hunter of humans. Something breaks inside me, the last thread connecting me to normal life. The woman with whom I shared a bed, whom I trusted, a monster. And not just a monster who derives pleasure from killing. Images flash through my mind, her strange absences, the bracelet inscribed to my huntress. Everything falls into place. The plan. I methodically destroy a bottle of whiskey, but intoxication doesn't come. My mind remains crystal clear, as if during a combat operation. I analyze the situation, assess resources, calculate options. Directly contacting the FBI without irrefutable evidence would be useless. The camera recording doesn't identify all participants clearly enough. Their faces are often hidden by shadows or headgear. The local police are in Harrington's pocket. Too many influential people involved, stakes too high. They'd eliminate me before I could reach federal agents. On television, a report covers a strange series of disappearances of homeless people in the neighboring county. The police show little enthusiasm for investigation. Typical migration of marginal elements, comments a smiling sheriff from the neighboring county, painfully similar to Colton. My gaze falls on a military service photograph standing on the mantelpiece. Delta Force, Operation Phantom, 2012. 6 men with faces smeared with camouflage paint, in full combat gear. Third from the left, me, with the same cold determination in my eyes that I now see in the mirror. The solution comes suddenly but with absolute clarity. I must become one of them, one of the potential victims. Must infiltrate their circle, gather irrefutable evidence, and destroy Harrington's entire organization from within. A classic undercover operation. I call Vanessa, who again is delayed in town. "Honey, I need to leave urgently," I say, controlling every note in my voice. Got a call from the guys in the unit, offering a 2-week contract. Nothing dangerous, just training rookies at the base in Colorado. "Oh," I hear poorly hidden relief in her voice. "Of course, darling, it'll be good for you to change scenery. When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow at dawn," I reply. "Don't wait up for dinner." "All right, take care." "No, I'll miss you. No, call me every day." Just the cold indifference of a woman who has mentally buried our marriage, perhaps me as well. After the call, I begin preparation. From a hidden compartment under the floorboards in the shed, I retrieve an army knife, survival kit, and a disguise kit I used during deep cover operations in Iran. I shave my head bald, grow stubble, prepare special makeup to create scars and burn marks on my face and neck. I study maps of the neighboring county, analyze disappearance patterns, identify probable victim selection points. I prepare a cover story, a fallen veteran with PTSD, an alcoholic who's lost touch with reality. A role painfully close to what I might have become had the psychologist not directed me to work in the reserve. I look at my new reflection in the mirror, the emaciated face of a homeless veteran with empty eyes. For the first time in many months, my gaze acquires clarity and purpose. The Ethan Blackwood who spent 15 years in the world's hottest conflict zones awakens within me. The soldier who survived where others broke. "Hunting time," I pronounce, testing the knife's sharpness on my thumb. A thin trickle of blood runs down my wrist, a reminder of the price to be paid. But that will come later. For now, I have only one goal: to become a hunter of hunters. I prepare for war, and for the first time in a long while I feel truly alive. Part 2. The Infiltration. Dawn broke cold when I left the forest cabin where my wife Vanessa likely dreamed of her lover Maxwell Harrington, a millionaire who collected human lives instead of art. I, Ethan Blackwood, exchanged my Ranger Patrol uniform for the tattered clothes of a homeless man. In my past life, I'd hunted terrorists. Now I would hunt hunters. Their prey were people no one would miss. Drifters, homeless, lost souls. Today I would become one of them. I knew the game I was entering was deadly dangerous, but the sight of my wife delivering an execution shot to a defenseless man changed everything. Sometimes, to confront monsters, you must become bait yourself. Becoming the prey. The town of Clearwater in the neighboring county greeted me with a gray mist of rain, and the indifference characteristic of places where everyone knows each other and no stranger is welcome. I found shelter under a bridge by the railroad station, a grim haven for social ghosts rejected by society. My new self, shaved head, 3-day stubble, artificial scars on my face and neck creating the illusion of burns received from an IED explosion. During the first day, I merely observed, studying the rhythms and patterns of street life. In the evening, I found a vagrant sharing the warmth of a trash fire with two similarly unfortunate souls. "New around here?" he asked, not raising his eyes from the flames. "Where from?" "Nowhere," I answered, offering him a bottle of cheap whiskey bought with my last money. "And heading nowhere." This simple gesture opened doors to a world invisible to ordinary people. By midnight, I'd learned more about Clearwater than I could have discovered in a week of official inquiries. "After the war?" asked an old man with a weathered face who introduced himself as Toby. I silently showed him my dog tags, genuine, with my name and blood type. "Sandbox or mountains?" Toby clarified, using slang for Iraq and Afghanistan. "Both, and places not on maps." Toby nodded understandingly. I noticed a faded Marine Corps tattoo on his wrist. "Bad dreams?" he asked quietly. "Every night," I replied, and that was pure truth. "Everyone here's fighting something, son, but there's something you should know." Toby lowered his voice to a whisper. "People have been disappearing these past months." "Common for drifters," I shrugged, mimicking the slight tremor in the hands, a sign of alcohol withdrawal I'd noticed in many street dwellers. "No, not like that. Not relocating but vanishing. Forever." Toby looked around as if fearing eavesdroppers. "And it happens after rich strangers appear." "What strangers?" "They arrive in big black SUVs, always well-dressed," Toby continued. "They show up at the last stand, a bar on the western outskirts. They look for someone who interests them. The next day, that person disappears." "Maybe they offer jobs," I suggested, maintaining the conversation. Old Toby laughed bitterly. "They take people no one will misunderstand. No documents, no connections, just ghosts like you and me. Ghosts are easily made permanently invisible." I inwardly shuddered at the accuracy of his words, another confirmation that my theory was correct. "This bar, the last stand, can you get a decent drink there?" I asked, deliberately changing my tone. "If you've got money, and you're ready for trouble." Toby leaned closer. "Listen to my advice, soldier, stay away from that place." Over the next 3 days, I methodically immersed myself in the role. Slept on cardboard under the open sky, ate from dumpsters behind the supermarket, avoided bathing to acquire the characteristic street smell. My speech became abrupt, with random flashes of aggression, typical behavior of a veteran with PTSD living without medication or support. I studied the pattern of disappearances, questioning the homeless, and all threads led to the Last Stand bar. In conversations with locals, I discovered the bar opened 6 months ago. The owner, a company with an unclear ownership structure. Among the staff, former military personnel, too professional for simple bouncers. Definitely a recruitment point for Harrington's hunts. On the evening of the 4th day, I decided I was ready. I spent the hour before sunset at the riverbank, looking at my reflection in the water. The man staring back at me was a stranger, tormented, embittered, with eyes that had seen too much death. The perfect bait. "Here we meet at last," I said to my reflection. "Time to hunt." The trap closes. The Last Stand turned out to be a dilapidated bar in the industrial zone, surrounded by abandoned warehouses. A concrete box with a neon sign, half the letters not working. Inside a dimly lit hall, a dozen tables, a bar counter of worn wood, the smell of beer, sweat, and desperation. I entered, staggering slightly, mimicking mild intoxication. I looked around, assessing the situation with professional thoroughness disguised as an ordinary drunk's curiosity. The patrons, several truck drivers, a couple of tired prostitutes, a handful of local alcoholics. Nothing remarkable. But the staff stood out from the general picture. The bartender, a stocky man with a characteristic Marine haircut and Special Forces tattoos on his forearms. Two bouncers at the entrance, both with military bearing and vigilant eyes accustomed to assessing threats. And two more at a far table, in expensive leather jackets, with short haircuts and confident movements of men used to having their orders obeyed. I ordered cheap whiskey and settled in a corner, watching. The bouncers clearly noted everyone entering the bar, paying special attention to solitary men without visible social connections. After the third drink, I started acting. "Hey, bartender," I shouted, slightly raising my voice. "More whiskey, and don't water it down. I can tell when I'm being cheated." Several heads turned in my direction. The bartender frowned but poured another glass. "Watch your language, friend," he warned. "We don't like troublesome customers here." "Troublesome?" I smirked, deliberately raising the tension. When I was surrounded for 3 days near Kandahar, that was trouble. This isn't even a warm-up. I noticed the two men in leather jackets exchange glances. One whispered something to his partner, who nodded. I'd caught their radar. Excellent. The next hour I spent methodically escalating aggression. Broke a glass, loudly recounted non-existent combat exploits, criticized everything and everyone. The bouncers were clearly waiting for just an excuse. When one of the men in leather jackets headed to the restroom, I decided the moment had arrived. I deliberately collided with him, spilling the remains of my whiskey on his expensive jacket. "What the hell, vagrant?" he growled, brushing himself off. "Do you know how much this jacket costs?" "Hey, you," I shouted, ignoring his question. "Yeah, you piece of shit in the expensive jacket. I've seen you somewhere. You're one of those who hid behind the backs of guys like me while we bled." The man's face contorted with anger, but I noticed a spark of interest in his eyes. He signaled to the bouncers approaching from both sides. "Get this drunk bastard out," he ordered. When the first bouncer put his hand on my shoulder, I activated the next phase of my plan. I spun sharply, employing a military hand-to-hand combat technique, knocked out his knee, then delivered a blow to the solar plexus. But the movements were clumsy enough to seem like a drunk's actions, not a trained fighter's. The second bouncer tried to grab me from behind. I turned, dodged his punch, and executed a classic boxing hook to the jaw. He staggered, surprised by the power of the hit. "Look at that, our drunk knows how to fight," said the man in the jacket with a note of respect in his voice. I deliberately left a gap in my defense, and the third guard, appearing from the back room, exploited it. A taser hit to the back did its job. I collapsed to the floor, convulsing, but managed to hear. "This one's special. The boss will appreciate such a specimen." Consciousness dimmed but didn't fade completely. My training included many hours developing resistance to pain and the ability to remain conscious even during strong shock impacts. I let them think I'd passed out while they dragged me through the back door into an unmarked van. "Veteran looks like," one of the kidnappers was saying. "Fought well for a drunk." "Boss said he wants variety. Some former Special Forces guy would make interesting prey." "For Harrington or for his wife?" The second one chuckled and they both laughed. The mention of wife hurt worse than the taser. Vanessa. They were talking about Vanessa. She'd become so immersed in this bloody sport that she was already perceived as Harrington's wife. They threw me into a metal cage in the van, roughly clicked handcuffs shut, and drove away. I opened my eyes just enough to assess the situation. The van was equipped for transporting live cargo, metal cages, restraints, soundproofing, professional work. Congratulations, Ethan, I mentally told myself. The trap has closed. You're no longer the hunter but the prey, and the game has only begun. Meeting the victims. I awoke to shaking and rumbling. The van moved along a bumpy road. My head throbbed from the taser impact, my mouth dry as sand. Two other men sat with me in the cage. The first, a muscular African-American with regular features marred by knife scars. His hands, with characteristic calluses from punches, identified him as a fighter. The second, a thin, pale man with a nervous tic in his left eye, a typical long-term homeless person, worn down by years on the street and possibly mental problems. Finally awake, observed the black man, studying me carefully. I thought they'd hit you too hard. Where are we? Where are they taking us? I asked, feigning confusion, although I already had a good idea of the answer. To some show for rich psychos, he replied, lowering his voice to a whisper. I heard them talking about fresh meat for the hunt. I'm Isaiah, by the way. Ethan, I introduced myself, using my real first name. The third man just huddled in the cage corner, arms wrapped around his knees. His gaze darted about like a cornered animal's. And that's Leo, Isaiah nodded toward him. He's not much for conversation, concussion or something like that, I think. I carefully examined our restraints, standard police handcuffs attached to steel rings on the van's floor. Primitive but effective. How'd you end up here? I asked Isaiah, assessing a potential ally. Underground fights, he answered emotionlessly. Was champion in 3 weight classes, then crossed the wrong people, had to go underground, lived in a motel on the outskirts of Clearwater. Yesterday evening some suits offered me a drink, woke up here. He looked at me intently. And you? Afghanistan, Iraq, I replied tersely. Came home, wife left, no work, standard story. But you're not a standard vagrant, Isaiah noted. I saw how you fought in the bar. That wasn't drunken flailing. That was system. I shrugged, avoiding a direct answer. War teaches you to defend yourself. The van braked sharply. We heard doors opening, voices. Then the van doors swung wide, admitting bright light that made Leo curl up even tighter. The guards, the same ones from the bar, pulled us outside. I barely controlled my reaction when I recognized the location. We were on the territory of Raven's Peak Wildlife Reserve, in that same remote part where I'd found Harper's body. Before us rose Harrington's luxurious hunting lodge, a 2-story building of logs and glass, designed to blend with the surrounding forest. On the wide veranda gathered a group of people, men and several women, all in expensive hunting gear. Among them I recognized a congressman, a high-ranking Pentagon official, a famous actor, and at the center Maxwell Harrington, surrounded by an aura of power and anticipation. Next to him, in a form-fitting camouflage suit, stood Vanessa. She looked vibrant, energetic, with a flush in her cheeks I hadn't seen in years. They lined us up before the veranda like cattle at auction. Harrington unhurriedly descended the steps, approached us. Gentlemen, welcome to Forest Retreat, he announced with a broad smile. Today you will participate in a special event. He approached Leo, who trembled from head to toe. Fear, Harrington pronounced thoughtfully, the most basic instinct. It reveals our true essence. Then he stopped before Isaiah, appraisingly eyeing his muscular body. Strength and endurance, excellent. You'll provide us much pleasure, mister. Go to hell, Isaiah growled through clenched teeth. Character, Harrington laughed, even better. Finally, he approached me. Our eyes met, and for a fraction of a second I thought he recognized me. But no, the makeup, stubble, change in posture and voice had done their job. And you're an interesting specimen, he drawled. Military experience, if I'm not mistaken. I remained silent, portraying grim wariness. Harrington stared intently into my eyes, as if trying to penetrate my thoughts, then nodded with satisfaction and returned to the veranda. My friends, he addressed the gathered crowd, I'm pleased to welcome you to our traditional autumn hunt. An approving murmur ran through the crowd. The rules are simple, Harrington continued. Our guests, he pointed at us, will be given a 1-hour head start. After that, the hunt begins. The territory is limited by electronic beacons. Attempting to cross the perimeter is not recommended. He paused for effect. Those who survive, though there haven't been any yet, we guarantee freedom and $100,000. Fair, isn't it? The guests laughed as if he made a joke. Vanessa stood slightly apart all this time, examining us with the professional interest of a taxidermist selecting a specimen for stuffing. Our eyes momentarily met, and I saw in hers nothing, emptiness, as if the person I once loved had completely vanished, leaving only a shell. Prepare them, Harrington commanded, and the guards led us to an outbuilding next to the main structure. There they removed our handcuffs, issued simple khaki-colored clothing, light boots and backpacks with a minimal survival kit, water flask, energy bar, matches, compass. That's it, Isaiah asked a guard. No weapons. Rabbits don't get carrots, the guard smirked, but you can look for something in the forest if you're lucky. I noticed Leo trying to open his flask with trembling hands. His fingers wouldn't obey from fear. Hey, I quietly addressed him. Once we're out, stay close, understood? He looked at me with crazed eyes and nodded, but I could see he was already psychologically broken. Such men die first in combat. The wall clock showed 4:30 p.m. About 2 hours remained until sunset. Time's running, said the senior guard, opening the back door. Run, rabbits, run. Seizing the initiative. At dawn the next day, Isaiah and I hid in thick undergrowth on the eastern slope of a hill. Leo wasn't with us. As I predicted, he couldn't withstand the psychological pressure. As soon as they released us, he ran without plan or strategy, driven only by panic. Less than a mile away, he activated a camouflaged tripwire, a trap specifically set on likely escape routes. Steel blades attached to a spring mechanism fatally wounded him. Leo's screams echoed through the forest as he died, while Isaiah and I, hidden, watched a group of hunters arrive to enjoy the dying man's agony. They're sick, Isaiah whispered as we retreated. They don't just kill, they savor it. Then we must become even sicker, I replied, assessing the terrain with professional precision. Standard patrol duties gave me an advantage. I knew this territory like the back of my hand. Every trail, every stream, every place suitable for an ambush. Listen, I said to Isaiah when we stopped at a small creek to drink. There are 2 paths, flee or fight. Flight is what they expect, what they count on. Isaiah looked at me intently. What do you suggest? We won't run away, we'll become hunters. I quickly outlined my plan to him. Instead of hiding and retreating, we'd set an ambush for a couple of hunters, disarm them, and use their own weapons against the rest. You talk like a pro, Isaiah noted suspiciously. How do you know this area? I had to partially reveal myself. I served in special units. Survival tactics and guerrilla warfare are part of the training. Why should I trust you? Isaiah asked directly. Maybe you're one of them, checking if I'll try to escape. Logical question, I nodded. But you have no choice. Alone, you'll certainly die. With me, there's a chance. And by the way, if I were with them, you'd already be bleeding out like Leo. Isaiah stared into my eyes for a long time, then nodded. All right, what's next? During the next hour, we prepared. I showed Isaiah how to make simple traps from available materials, stones, branches, vines. We camouflaged our positions, covered our tracks, created a false route designed to lead pursuers directly to us. Soon we heard voices. 2 hunters, portly businessmen in expensive camouflage, with high-tech rifles and night vision devices, followed our false trail, confidently conversing. These ones aren't going anywhere, one said to the other. Looks like they split up. The vagrant went to the creek. Harrington said the black guy's a fighter, replied the second. We'll leave him for Maxwell. We can take the vagrant ourselves. Isaiah and I exchanged glances. The plan worked. They divided us in their imagination, lowering their guard. When the hunters approached a small clearing where we'd set our ambush, I gave the signal. Isaiah jumped out of hiding, attracting their attention, then immediately dove back. As expected, they rushed after him, straight onto the camouflaged pit covered with branches and leaves. One fell, crying out loudly in pain. Improvised stakes pierced his leg. The second hesitated, and I struck him from behind with a heavy branch to the back of the head. It took less than a minute. Two experienced hunters, never having been in a real war, lay disarmed. One unconscious, the second writhing in pain, clutching wounds on his thigh. Holy shit, Isaiah exhaled, looking at our trophies. We did it. We really did it. This is just the beginning, I replied, checking the rifles. AR-15s with optical sights and suppressors, Glock 19 pistols, hunting knives, radios, night vision devices, elite equipment for an elite hunt. I methodically searched the fallen enemies, taking everything useful: ammunition, energy bars, water flasks, navigators, even the handcuffs we used to bind them. What about them? Isaiah nodded toward the prisoners. Leave them here, I decided. They're not dangerous. When it's over, someone will find them. If they survive, lucky them. Where'd you learn these techniques? Isaiah asked as we departed with our trophies. That's not standard army training. Afghanistan, Iraq, places you've never heard of, I answered, checking a rifle. Special operations, counterterrorism tactics. Isaiah studied me for a long time. You're not just a vagrant with PTSD, are you? Who are you really? I understood that if I wanted Isaiah to fully trust me, I needed to reveal at least part of the truth. I'm not a random victim. I came to stop this nightmare, I said, telling him about the activist's body I found, about the corruption of local authorities, but omitting my true identity, and about Vanessa. Why do you trust me? Isaiah asked when I finished. Because we have one goal: to survive, and because you have nothing to lose like me, I replied, handing him one of the pistols. Now we're hunters, not prey. Tactical advantage. The next 20 hours transformed into a series of rapid confrontations, where Isaiah and I seized the initiative, using guerrilla tactics against the enemy's superior forces. Instead of hiding and running, we actively hunted the hunters, using my knowledge of the terrain and military training. The first group, 3 businessmen with a guide, fell for the old singing forest trick. I taught Isaiah how to tie thin fishing lines to tree branches at different heights. With the slightest breeze, they produced strange sounds, attracting attention and disorienting the enemy. While the hunters listened in bewilderment to the strange noises, we approached from the rear and neutralized them one by one. Where did you learn this? Isaiah asked afterward. Vietnamese guerrillas use such techniques against Americans, I replied. History tends to repeat itself. We met the second group of 4 people at a small canyon. I'd prepared a rock slide in advance, and when they entered the narrow passage, a simple system with a rope and trigger mechanism unleashed a stream of rocks on them, not killing but seriously injuring 2 and cutting the group off from the main forces. This isn't fair, shouted one of them, an elderly man in glasses clutching a broken arm. We paid for a fair hunt. Fair hunt, Isaiah repeated, emerging from cover with a weapon at the ready. On humans. During the skirmish, one of the hunters tried to draw a backup pistol. I reacted instantly, knocking the weapon away and breaking his wrist. His eyes registered shock. He couldn't believe the prey proved more dangerous than the hunter. By the evening of the second day, our arsenal expanded with 3 more rifles, several pistols, and even an M203 grenade launcher attached to one of the AR-15s. I forced myself to be ruthless yet methodical. The soldier in me rejoiced at each tactical victory, but the human being shuddered at the necessity of applying my skills against civilians, even criminals. However, some of the hunters turned out to be former military. These posed a real threat and required special approach. One such, a sturdy man with characteristic special forces features, nearly caught us by surprise as we set up an ambush. He moved professionally, almost soundlessly through the undergrowth. Only years of training helped me hear his approach. "Freeze," I whispered to Isaiah, and the next moment threw a stone far to the side. The old trick worked. The hunter distracted for a second, and that was enough to catch him in my sights. "Drop the weapon," I ordered, slowly. He obeyed, but I could see in his eyes he was assessing the situation. "You're one of us," he said calmly. "Fifth Special Forces Group." "None of your business," I cut him off. "Harrington knows," he continued. "Your signature is too professional. They've already called in real hunters." "Then we'll have to hurry," I replied, striking him unconscious with the pistol grip. When he lost consciousness, Isaiah asked, "Is he right? Are you from Special Forces?" "Was once," I answered evasively. Toward nightfall, Isaiah and I made camp in a well-camouflaged shelter I'd prepared under a fallen tree. He told me about his life, how after Army discharge, he couldn't find himself in civilian life and ended up in the world of underground fights. About his wife who couldn't endure his night terrors and left, taking their daughter. About the downward path that led him to a motel on the outskirts of Clearwater. Isaiah's story would too closely resemble my own, if not for Vanessa, and if I'd truly broken like many veterans. "You know," Isaiah said, examining a trophy pistol, "for the first time in a long while I feel alive, like there's purpose again." I nodded, understanding his feelings. Many veterans lack exactly this: a clear mission, adrenaline, the sense that their actions matter. "If we get out of here," he continued, "what then?" "First let's get out," I replied, listening to the night sounds of the forest. "Then we'll decide." By my calculations, we'd neutralized about half the hunters. But we still faced the most dangerous part, the professional mercenaries whom, according to our prisoner, Harrington had summoned. And Harrington himself, who, as I already knew, wasn't just a wealthy sadist but a trained fighter. On the morning of the third day, we heard a helicopter. Black, unmarked, it hovered over the forest, and 6 people in tactical gear disembarked from it. "And here come the real predators," I muttered, observing through binoculars the precise, coordinated movements of the group. "These won't run from the first shot." "What will we do?" asked Isaiah. "What they don't expect," I answered. "Instead of defending, we'll strike at the heart of their operation." Panic in the predators' camp. An atmosphere of panic and anger reigned in Harrington's hunting lodge. Through a miniature drone we'd captured from one of the groups, we could see what was happening. The drone's camera transmitted images to a smartphone screen. "They've killed 8 people. 8, shouted one of the organizers, an elderly man in an expensive hunting suit. "This is a disaster if information leaks." "Calm down, Richards," Maxwell Harrington coldly replied, maintaining outward composure. "The situation is under control. The new team is already in place." "Under control," Richards persisted. 2 congressmen wounded, Sullivan in critical condition with a penetrating chest wound. If he dies, the family will receive generous compensation and will continue," Harrington cut him off. "Everyone knew the risks. Everyone signed agreements." Vanessa entered the room from the terrace. In form-fitting camouflage, with hair pulled back in a ponytail, she looked like an Amazon from ancient legends. A rifle hung on her shoulder with a casualness indicating familiarity with weapons. "Maxwell Mason's team reports finding signs of guerrilla tactics," she said in a businesslike tone. "Tripwires, traps, signaling systems. This isn't the behavior of ordinary fugitives." Harrington thoughtfully rubbed his chin. "So our vagrant isn't as simple as he seemed. Military experience." The team believes he's a guerrilla warfare specialist, possibly special forces or something similar, Vanessa replied. A shadow of concern crossed her face, which she quickly suppressed. I knew that look. She suspected something but hadn't yet assembled all the puzzle pieces. This is no longer a game, gentlemen, Harrington announced to those gathered. This is a cleanup operation. Everyone stays in the lodge until further notice. I'll personally lead the final operation. I turned off the drone transmission and looked at Isaiah. They're scared, perfect time for a counterattack. The plan was risky but feasible. During a night raid on Harrington's camp, we would create maximum chaos, blow up fuel tanks, destroy transportation, cut communications, and if lucky, capture one of the high-ranking participants to obtain evidence. We approached the camp under cover of darkness, using all stealth skills. Observation showed 4 mercenaries guarding the perimeter, professionals, but predictable in their movements. We start in 20 minutes, I whispered to Isaiah. As soon as you hear the first explosion, follow the plan. Don't take unnecessary risks. I placed improvised explosive devices near fuel tanks and generators. Then, using branches and stones, created distracting noises from the opposite side of the camp. When 2 guards went to check, I silently neutralized the remaining ones. The detonation thundered in the night's silence like a clap of doom. Fuel tanks exploded one after another, illuminating the camp with bright flames. Panic ensued. People ran from the lodge, not understanding what was happening. Isaiah, as planned, opened fire on the vehicles, destroying tires and fuel systems. In the evacuation chaos, we noticed an elderly man trying to slip away unnoticed through the back door. I recognized him from the news. Senator Crawford, a known veterans' rights advocate, author of several bills supporting former service members. Take him, I briefly ordered Isaiah, and we surrounded the senator, giving him no chance to escape. What do you want? He asked, trying to maintain dignity, but his trembling voice betrayed panic. Money, I have money, lots of money. We want the truth, Senator, I replied, dragging him into the forest, away from the fire and commotion. When we reached a safe place, I pressed a knife to Crawford's throat. You don't understand, he forced us, the senator stammered. Who, Harrington, I pressed. Tell us everything and perhaps you'll survive. Under pressure, Senator Crawford broke surprisingly quickly for a man of his position. From his disjointed account emerged a picture of a monstrous mechanism of power and blackmail. Harrington collects compromising material on everyone who participates in the hunt, the senator related, shaking from fear and the night's cold. The first time, you're invited just as an observer. They offer drinks, drugs if you want. Then they show footage of you laughing, applauding someone's murder. After that, you have 2 choices, join or be destroyed. And you chose to become a murderer, I stated. I have a family, a career, exclaimed the senator. You can't imagine how influential he is. His network is everywhere, police, courts, even federal structures. How long has this been going on? I asked. 5 years, maybe more, Crawford answered. At first it was a small group, then it grew. Now it's almost a cult, some even enjoy it. They become addicted to the adrenaline, to the power over another's life. I thought of Vanessa, of how she transformed from a loving wife into a predator who derived pleasure from others' deaths. There are professionals here, former special forces, the senator continued. They've already identified in your actions the signature of Delta Force. Harrington knows you're not just a vagrant, he warned. At that moment, an alarm siren wailed. On the camp grounds, a signal rocket soared, illuminating the night sky with red light. The final hunt has begun, declared the senator with sudden glee. Harrington personally leads it, and he's brought his lucky charm. Who is this charm? I asked, though I already knew the answer. His new woman, you must have seen her, blonde with blue eyes. Cold as ice, she never misses, never. Vanessa, My heart constricted, but outwardly I remained calm. "What should we do with him?" asked Isaiah, nodding toward the senator. "Tie him up and leave him here," I decided. "If we survive, we'll come back for him. His testimony will be important." We securely bound the senator and hid him in a sheltered spot. He shouted after us, "You won't leave alive. No one has ever escaped Harrington." In the distance, we heard a helicopter and voices of an approaching pursuit group. From the sounds of working radios, I understood they were coordinating actions, surrounding us. "They're driving us toward the canyon," I told Isaiah. "They think we'll have no escape routes there." "And what will we do?" he asked. "What they don't expect," I answered with cold confidence. "We won't run away. We'll set a trap for them where they think they'll corner us." I looked at the starry sky, at smoke from the fire rising above Harrington's camp, at the moon illuminating the treetops. Something told me the coming day would be the last in this hunt. For some of us, the last in life. Distant sounds of gunshots and barking dogs urged us forward. We moved toward the canyon, not as victims fleeing danger, but as predators luring prey into a deadly trap. "They think they're hurting us," I said to Isaiah as we rapidly moved through the dark forest. "But actually, we're luring them to where we'll have the advantage." The hunt continued, but now the hunters had become prey, and I was ready to show Harrington and Vanessa what it meant to be true game, the kind that bites back. Part 3: Reckoning. In the forest, 3 types of people reveal their true face: those who consider themselves predators, those who accept the role of prey, and those who were always warriors. I, Ethan Blackwood, having endured 15 years of hellish deployments with Delta Force, knew that Maxwell Harrington, a predator playing at hunting humans, had never faced a real opponent. The man who transformed my wife Vanessa into the same cold-blooded monster now came for us, for me and Isaiah, the only survivor among the game who'd become my ally. Today Harrington would learn what it means to be the prey of someone who survived where others died. I wasn't seeking revenge for Vanessa's betrayal. I sought justice for all who became victims of their perverted game. Preparing for the final confrontation. Gray dawn broke through the tree canopy as Isaiah and I reached the northern edge of Eclipse Canyon, a geological scar in the heart of the reserve that I'd studied during numerous patrols. A narrow gorge with sheer walls and a winding bottom, once carved by an ancient stream, created the perfect arena for the final act of our drama. "Right here," I said, pointing to a natural fissure in the rock. 200 yards of well-visible space with limited entry and exit paths, the perfect trap. A trap for them or for us? Isaiah surveyed the gorge with the appraising eye of a fighter accustomed to calculating risks. "For those who don't know the terrain," I replied, checking a trophy rifle. "There are 3 natural exits, plus I know a secret trail used by bootleggers during Prohibition." I led Isaiah to a stone ledge and pointed to a barely visible path hidden behind a rock outcropping. "If everything goes sideways, we retreat along this. It leads to a stream and from there to the eastern road." Isaiah nodded, memorizing the route. "But if isn't a plan," I continued, unfolding a map of the area we'd found on one of the neutralized hunters. "And our plan is simple in concept but complex in execution. They think they'll drive us in here and trap us like rats in a cage. We'll let them think that." Over the next 3 hours, we created an intricate system of traps and explosive devices, transforming the canyon into a deadly labyrinth. I used techniques they taught us for creating defensive positions in the mountains of Afghanistan, adapting them to available materials. Improvised mines from ammunition and combustible materials, tripwires concealing deep pits, false tracks and markers leading to dead ends. "Where did you learn all this?" asked Isaiah, watching me set up a detonator from a modified mobile phone. "Environmental modification tactics," I answered, tightening the last knot. "When you have limited resources, you turn the terrain into a weapon. First rule of survival in enemy territory. I refined the placement of some traps, adapting them to our pursuer's psychology. Knowing there would be both amateurs and professionals among them, I created primitive tripwires that an experienced fighter would notice and avoid, only to fall into a much more complex trap designed for his overconfidence. Layers of deception, like in a chess game. Isaiah proved a valuable assistant. His street fighting experience and intuitive understanding of tactics complemented my formal military training. I placed stolen phones from hunters at strategic points, setting them to record. Evidence was necessary, not only to expose Harrington, but to protect Isaiah and myself if we survived. I don't want to kill everyone, I explained, checking the view from a position chosen for the final stage. I need Harrington and evidence, the rest case by case. Isaiah nodded understandingly. In every gang, there's a leader and followers. Kill the leader, the pack scatters. By noon, everything was ready. I strategically placed our trophy rifles, pistols, and grenades in hideouts throughout the canyon. Backup arsenals in case we needed to change position quickly. Final element, I said, taking a disguise kit from my backpack. We need them to think we're weaker than we actually are. I applied fake blood to my face and hands, tore my clothes in several places, simulating injuries. Isaiah did the same. Now we looked like exhausted, wounded fugitives, exactly what the hunters expected to see. Now, I said, applying the finishing touches of makeup, let's leave them an obvious trail. Like in Iraq, make them see what they want to see. We left noticeable footprints, deliberately uneven as if from a limping person, leading straight to the canyon's center. There in an open space I arranged a small camp, a primitive fire, food remains, a torn backpack, a picture of despair and defeat. Your position is the northern outcrop, I instructed Isaiah. From there you control the only retreat path. If I signal 3 short flashlight blinks, immediately leave by the secret trail. Don't wait for me. I won't leave you, Isaiah objected. This isn't a request, it's an order, I cut him off. Someone must survive to tell the truth. I took position at the center of our trap, disguised as a wounded and exhausted fugitive. Everything was ready. We heard voices and breaking branches. The search party approached. The hunters came for their prey, not suspecting the roles had long since reversed. The hunter becomes prey. 2 mercenaries in tactical gear entered the canyon first. They moved professionally, covering each other, scanning the terrain through rifle scopes. One noticed the tracks we'd left and gestured to his partner. I observed them through a gap between rocks, not moving, barely breathing. Next came 4 more, 3 in camouflage, and 1 in civilian clothes with an expensive hunting rifle. From their behavior, I deduced they weren't professionals but Harrington's guests, wealthy thrill seekers given a chance to participate in the final hunt. And finally, the main characters. Maxwell Harrington, dressed in a perfectly tailored hunting suit, with a custom rifle inlaid with mother-of-pearl and probably worth as much as a small car. His posture and movements betrayed a man absolutely confident in his power and superiority. Beside him walked Vanessa. Her movements were graceful, even predatory feline plasticity of a hunter, not prey. In form-fitting camouflage, hair gathered in a strict ponytail, rifle in hand, she appeared like a post-apocalyptic action heroine stepped off the screen. But the expression on her face, that's what made my heart clench. Cold calculation and anticipation, excitement for the impending kill. What had become of the woman I once loved? The group stopped at the canyon entrance. One mercenary said something to Harrington, pointing at the tracks. Harrington nodded with satisfaction and addressed the gathering. "Gentleman and beautiful lady," he gallantly bowed to Vanessa, "our game is cornered. Judging by the tracks, they're wounded and exhausted. I suggest we split up to block all possible retreat paths." "Maxwell, this seems too easy," Vanessa remarked, studying the gorge with the wariness I knew well. This trait of hers, intuitive sense of danger, I'd always respected. Why would they choose this canyon? They're trapped here. Precisely, darling, Harrington smiled condescendingly. They're panicking. A cornered animal always makes mistakes, especially when wounded. This vagrant has already proven he's not ordinary game, Vanessa objected. Something's not right here. Your paranoia is charming, Harrington kissed her cheek. But even the most dangerous beast becomes helpless when surrounded. I barely suppressed a bitter smirk. Harrington, with all his self-confidence and resources, committed the classic mistake, underestimating his opponent. The group began advancing deeper into the canyon, following our planted tracks. The first mercenary activated one of our primitive traps, a fallen log designed to attract attention but cause no harm. As I expected, this only heightened their vigilance and made them move slower, giving me more time. "They're here," announced one of the mercenaries, pointing to the camp in the canyon's center where I'd created the illusion of the fugitives' desperate last refuge. From my ledge position, I watched Harrington's group surround the camp, preparing for the final act of their hunt. They didn't notice they'd already activated two of my real traps, silent markers giving me precise knowledge of their positions. I retreated deeper into a prepared hiding place. It sat on a small ledge overlooking the camp. The position allowed me to see all hunt participants while remaining invisible. I prepared the first phone for remote activation of explosive devices. Harrington and Vanessa approached the camp's center. My ears caught their conversation. "Where are they?" asked one guest, nervously looking around. "Perhaps they heard us and tried to hide," replied a mercenary in tactical gear. "But they won't get far. The perimeter is closed." "We'll split up and comb the gorge," Harrington ordered. "Alpha Group, Western Section, Beta, Eastern. Vanessa, you're with me." At this moment, I decided it was time to let them know whom they were dealing with. I activated the first explosive device, far enough from the group not to injure, but close enough to frighten. The explosion echoed through the canyon, then a second from the opposite side. Harrington's group found themselves squeezed between them. "Ambush!" shouted one of the mercenaries, taking a defensive position. I turned on a hidden radio, tuned to their frequency. "Welcome to the hunt, gentlemen," I announced in a voice altered by a homemade modulator. "But today, you're the game." The chaos following my statement was precisely calculated. The mercenaries tried to determine the transmission source. The guests huddled together, vulnerable and confused. Harrington maintained outward calm, but his eyes betrayed anger and, what particularly pleased me, fear. Vanessa reacted differently. Her face froze in the focused expression of a professional assessing a suddenly changed situation. She scanned the rocks, and for a moment I thought her gaze stopped exactly on my hiding place. But no, the camouflage was too good. "This son of a bitch is playing with us," Harrington hissed. "No one dares play with me." I activated the next series of traps, several simultaneous explosions bringing down rocks on the main retreat path. Now the group was cut off from quick escape from the canyon. "This isn't a game, Mr. Harrington," I said into the radio. "This is reckoning." I noticed Vanessa flinch upon hearing my voice. Despite the modulator, something in the intonation seemed familiar to her. Her eyes narrowed, and she whispered something to Harrington. He shook his head and loudly addressed the invisible opponent. "Who are you? What do you want?" "Now that's the right question," I replied. "I want justice. For Leo, for Harper, for everyone you killed for entertainment." At Harper's mention, Harrington's face changed, acquiring an expression of cold fury. "Alpha Gamma, search the eastern sector," he ordered on the radio. "This bastard is somewhere there." Two mercenaries immediately moved in the indicated direction. I let them go. They would soon meet Isaiah and our prepared traps. Time to take the stage. I descended from the ledge, using rock shadows as cover, and took position among boulders 20 yards from Harrington and Vanessa. The makeup applied earlier and torn clothes made me look like a wounded man barely standing. I deliberately stepped into the field of vision of one of the guests. "There," he exclaimed, raising his rifle. All eyes turned toward me. I staggered, feigning weakness, and, as if stumbling, fell to one knee. "That's all, scum," Harrington pronounced with a triumphant smile. "Game over." He signaled to Vanessa. "Darling, I think you should take the final shot. You've earned this pleasure." Vanessa stepped forward, raising a silenced pistol. Her movements were fluid, confident, like a dancer in a deadly waltz. She approached within 10 yards, aiming at my head. On her face froze the professional indifference of a hunter completing a successful hunt. But when our eyes met, something changed. The mask faltered. She took another step and suddenly froze, recognizing familiar features beneath the layer of dirt and artificial scars. "Ethan," she exhaled, and her hand with the pistol trembled. "But you're supposed to be on assignment." The moment of truth. Time seemed to stop in this moment of recognition. I saw Vanessa's pupils dilate, blood drain from her face. For the first time during our deadly game, I saw in her eyes real, genuine fear. "What's happening?" Harrington sharply asked, noticing her hesitation. "Shoot, what are you waiting for?" But Vanessa stood paralyzed, the pistol in her hand barely noticeably trembling. She took another step toward me, as if not believing her eyes. "This is impossible," she whispered. "How did you?" "Vanessa," Harrington's voice cracked like a whip, "finish him now." I saw the struggle on her face, remnants of humanity against the new predatory nature. In this tense moment, Vanessa, thinking I would die anyway, decided to confess. "You know," she said quietly but distinctly, "I never loved our life in the wilderness. You were always so righteous." She pronounced this word with a shade of contempt. "Maxwell showed me real life, real hunting. With each shot I felt alive." She raised the pistol again, aiming at my head. Her hand no longer trembled. "You were a good husband, but too boring, too controlling, always knew better. Now I decide who lives and who dies." She took a deep breath, and I saw her finger rest on the trigger. "Goodbye, dear," she whispered. At that moment, I pressed the detonator activation button, triggering the first of our prepared traps. A powerful explosion shook the canyon's left slope, not strong enough to cause a landslide, but sufficient to create panic and divert attention. Almost simultaneously, a second series of explosions activated around the perimeter, creating the illusion of a full-scale attack. While Harrington and the others tried to understand what was happening, I lunged forward. With a convulsive movement that caught Vanessa by surprise, I knocked the pistol from her hand. I spun the stunned Vanessa around and immobilized her, twisting her arm behind her back and placing her own pistol against her throat. "What the?" Harrington turned and froze, seeing the situation. "Drop your weapons," I commanded, no longer concealing my real voice. "All of you, slowly." The professional mercenaries hesitated, assessing the chances. I pressed the pistol harder against Vanessa's throat, eliciting a painful cry from her. "I won't repeat myself." "Do as he says," Harrington gritted out, first slowly lowering his rifle to the ground. The others followed his example. "How?" Vanessa gasped. "You were nearly dead." "I learned to play the victim," I replied, not loosening my grip. "Seems you were good at that too." In her eyes flashed rage mixed with wounded pride. The man she considered predictable and boring had just outplayed her at her own game. "Who are you?" asked Harrington, studying me carefully. "What do you want?" "I already said," I answered, binding Vanessa's wrists with a plastic tie. "Justice." "Everything can be resolved," Harrington said in a businesslike tone. "Name your price." "My price is your empire," I said, "destroyed, and everyone who participated in your hunts facing trial." Harrington laughed, but there was no mirth in his laugh. You think you've won, that you've cornered me? He shook his head. You don't understand who you're dealing with. I'm offering you one last chance. Release Vanessa, walk away, and I'll forget all this. I'll even pay you 10 million, enough to start a new life anywhere. Maxwell, exclaimed Vanessa, don't listen to him, he's bluffing. Ethan was always soft-hearted, he can't. Shut up, Harrington cut her off sharply. You ruined everything. If you'd shot immediately, it would all be over. Such disappointment and contempt sounded in his voice that Vanessa's face contorted with humiliation and pain. Maxwell, please, I'll fix. She knows too much, Harrington continued as if she weren't there. He addressed the mercenaries. Eliminate them both, and the witnesses too, he nodded toward his guests, who in horror tried to comprehend that they too had become expendable. But we paid, exclaimed one of the wealthy hunters. And received an unforgettable adventure, Harrington smiled coldly, unfortunately with a lethal outcome. This became the signal. The mercenaries who'd been waiting simultaneously drew backup weapons. I expected this, two experienced fighters to have only one means of defense. But I was ready too. A strategically placed charge activated from a simple click of a device hidden in my sleeve. The explosion wasn't large, more loud and blinding, like a flash grenade. In the ensuing chaos, I shoved Vanessa away and dove behind the nearest boulder, simultaneously drawing a hidden rifle. Isaiah now, I shouted, and from the northern slope came targeted fire. My ally opened fire on the mercenaries' positions, forcing them to seek cover. A real battle began. The chaos of battle. Gunpowder smoke and dust from explosions filled the canyon, creating the perfect environment for diversionary tactics. I moved from cover to cover, using prepared points and corridors inaccessible to the enemy. Each movement formed part of a pre-planned choreography of death. Harrington's mercenaries proved well prepared. They quickly reorganized into combat formation, acting as a coordinated team, covering each other with fire, trying to determine our location. But the canyon, transformed into a labyrinth of traps, gave us the advantage. I activated the next series of charges, deliberately cutting off Harrington's retreat path. He mustn't escape, for justice, for the victims, for my own peace of mind. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Vanessa, who, using the commotion, freed herself from restraints and now tried to reach discarded weapons. Her movements betrayed panic. For the first time ever, she found herself on the wrong side of the hunt, and this robbed her of composure. Two mercenaries attempted to flank me but walked straight into a mined area. Simultaneously triggered charges didn't kill them but disabled them. With such injuries, they no longer posed a threat. Robin's left flank, shouted Harrington, trying to organize a defense. I smiled. Now I knew the name and position of another opponent. Roll, short run, jump behind a rock outcrop, and I found myself in perfect shooting position. Isaiah acted from his side, preventing the enemy from regrouping, creating the illusion that we were more than two. He used one of my techniques, rapidly changing positions after several shots, disorienting the mercenaries. In the midst of the firefight, I noticed Harrington trying to retreat toward the canyon's eastern exit where a helicopter waited. He moved crouched, using stones and outcroppings as cover, shielding himself with one of the mercenaries as a human shield. Coward, I muttered, changing position to intercept him. Intense fire exchange continued, but now I saw the mercenaries acting chaotically, without a clear plan. They'd lost initiative and now merely reacted to our actions, losing the advantage of superior force. Suddenly, fire from Isaiah's position ceased. I tensed, fearing the worst, but after several seconds heard the agreed signal, 3 short whistles. He was alive, just changing position. One of Harrington's guests, an elderly man in an expensive hunting suit, used the pause to try escaping. He chose the wrong direction and caught crossfire from mercenaries who decided they couldn't leave witnesses. I intercepted Harrington at the foot of a rock leading to the eastern exit. He was alone. Evidently his shield fell behind or was killed. "It's over, Maxwell," I said, emerging from behind a boulder with a pistol aimed at him. He didn't look surprised, rather angry and curious. "So who are you?" he asked, not making sudden movements but studying me carefully. Clearly not an ordinary vagrant, special forces, CIA, something personal. I didn't answer, keeping him at gunpoint. "Drop the weapon slowly." Harrington smirked and obeyed, carefully placing his pistol on the ground. "You know I respect professionalism," he said, straightening up. "Good operation, almost flawless. The problem is—" His movement came lightning fast. A knife gleamed in his hand, hidden in his sleeve. I barely managed to dodge, but the blade still grazed my ribs, cutting through clothes and skin. "That almost doesn't count," he finished, assuming the stance of an experienced fighter. I didn't shoot, too risky in the confined space between rocks where a ricochet could prove fatal for me. Instead, I parried the next blow and delivered a counterattack, aiming for the throat. Harrington blocked the attack with unexpected agility for a civilian. His technique revealed special training, probably private instructors, former special forces operators training a wealthy client. A vicious hand-to-hand fight ensued. Harrington proved a formidable opponent, quick, calculating, with no wasted movements. I was wounded, exhausted from 3 days in the forest, but had years of real combat experience behind me, not training in comfortable gyms. Harrington executed a series of powerful attacks, forcing me to retreat toward the cliff edge. His face, previously always impassive, now contorted with rage and excitement. He sensed advantage and prepared for the finishing blow. "Elite," he spat, blocking my counterattack. "You all think you're special, that rules aren't written for you, but in the end, at the very end, you're just as mortal." I didn't waste breath on conversation, focusing on the fight. My ribs burned from the wound. Black dots danced before my eyes from fatigue. With one hand I gripped a knife, with the other tried to restrain Harrington's armed hand. Unexpectedly, a shadow flashed behind his back. Vanessa. She crept toward us, clutching a rock shard. I couldn't tell whom she'd chosen as target, me or Harrington. In her eyes I read the desperation of a cornered predator. Harrington noticed my glance and began turning, but too late. Vanessa, with a wild cry, lunged at him, swinging the rock. "Traitor," she screamed. "You abandoned me there." Harrington recoiled from the unexpected attack, losing balance on the ledge's edge. I seized the moment and delivered a kick to his knee. A crack sounded. The joint couldn't withstand it. Harrington fell, dropping the knife, but in falling grabbed Vanessa, dragging her with him. They rolled down the rocky slope, locked in desperate struggle. I rushed after them, sliding and jumping over rocks, trying not to lose sight of them in the dust clouds. The final shot. They stopped 50 feet below, on a small platform overhanging the canyon's deepest part. Vanessa lay motionless, blood from a head wound coloring her blonde hair crimson. Harrington, limping on his damaged leg, tried rising. He saw me descending the slope and lunged for a pistol that had fallen from Vanessa's holster during the fall. I was faster. Jump, roll, strike, and the pistol flew to the platform's edge. "It's over, Maxwell," I repeated, breathing heavily. Harrington retreated, pressing his back against the rock. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked again. "Why all this?" "I'm Ethan Blackwood," I answered. "Vanessa's husband, senior ranger at Ravens Peak Wildlife Reserve, former Delta Force." His eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed in calculating squint. "Ah, so that's it, personal vendetta because of your wife," he smirked despite the pain. "She came to me herself, you know, craved the thrills you couldn't give her." I didn't rise to the provocation. This isn't about her, it's about justice, about everyone you killed. Justice? Harrington laughed. There's no justice in the world, Blackwood, only power. Whoever has power sets the rules. I heard Vanessa's moans. She was regaining consciousness. Her hand moved, feeling the ground, as if searching for a weapon. And now the power is mine, I replied, pulling out a phone, as are the proofs of all your hunts. Senator Crawford's confession, participant lists, burial sites. I'll still get away clean, Harrington objected, but confidence had left his voice. My connections will vanish once the truth emerges, I finished for him. No one will want to be associated with a serial killer, even if yesterday he was their best friend. Harrington appraisingly looked at me, then shifted his gaze to Vanessa, who tried rising, clutching her bloody head. Know what's most amusing, he said, taking a careful step sideways. She loved it every second, the first time I forced her. Then she asked herself, begged, your wife is a born predator, Blackwood. This darkness always slept within her. I merely awakened it. Vanessa finally stood, glaring at Harrington with hatred. You used me, she rasped, manipulated me. Oh, don't be such a hypocrite, darling, Harrington smirked. You enjoyed every kill, admit it at least now before death. I saw the struggle on Vanessa's face, struggle between self-deception and terrible truth. Harrington used this moment to make a sharp lunge sideways, trying to reach a pistol lying several steps from him. I intercepted him. Rolling over my shoulder, I grabbed the weapon and aimed at Harrington, who froze half a step from the platform's edge. You won't shoot, he said with the confidence of a psychologist who'd studied my personality. You're a soldier, not a murderer. You need my confession, a trial, justice's triumph. You won't shoot an unarmed man. He's right, Ethan, Vanessa suddenly said, taking a step toward me. You've always been righteous, always followed the code, killing an unarmed man. That's not you. I gripped the pistol tighter, feeling sweat trickling down my temples. I once believed in a code, I said, in rules, in the system. But you, Maxwell, showed that for people like you, none of this matters. Harrington slowly straightened, reading doubt in my eyes. His hand subtly slid behind his belt where, I was certain, another weapon hid. I saw the movement before he could complete it, but instead of shooting, I tossed the pistol to Vanessa, who stood closer. She caught it with professional dexterity. Decide for yourself, I told her, for the first time in a long while. Her eyes widened in surprise. Harrington froze, not completing his movement, shock on his face. Vanessa shifted her gaze from the pistol to me, then to Harrington. He'll never give you what I give, Harrington shouted with sudden desperation. The freedom to decide who deserves to live, power over life and death. I saw her hesitate, saw two beings struggle within her, the woman I loved and the predator created by Harrington. At this moment, something unforeseen happened. Harrington, seeing her indecision, drew his hidden pistol and fired, not at me, at Vanessa. You know too much, darling, he said with cold fury, and you're too unstable. The bullet struck Vanessa in the shoulder. She cried out and fell to her knees but kept hold of the pistol. Reflexively, I rushed to her, and at that moment Harrington turned his weapon on me. What happened next was more instinct than conscious action. I caught his hand, twisting the wrist until bones cracked. The pistol fell, but Harrington drew a knife with his other hand and with insane fury struck. I barely managed to dodge. The blade ripped my jacket sleeve but missed skin. We grappled in a final struggle, balancing on the cliff's edge. He was wounded, but rage gave him strength. I was exhausted. The bleeding wound on my ribs slowed my movements. At the critical moment when Harrington's knife was an inch from my throat, I heard a shot. His body jerked, his grip weakened. He slowly turned his head and saw Vanessa who, bleeding, held a smoking pistol. No one calls me. Expendable, she said before collapsing again. Harrington, with a bullet in his shoulder, furiously lunged at her with his knife. But I intercepted him, and in the last, decisive confrontation applied a technique taught in Delta Force for situations with no other way out. Sharp turn, pull, and Harrington's cervical vertebrae couldn't withstand it. His body lifelessly slumped onto the rocks, eyes glazed, staring at the sky but not seeing it. I rushed to Vanessa, who was losing consciousness from blood loss. The price of victory and a new beginning. Vanessa's wound was serious but not fatal. The bullet passed through, missing arteries. I used field medicine skills, stopping the bleeding and making an improvised bandage from clothing scraps. From the canyon came rare shots. The battle neared its end. I activated the radio, contacting Isaiah. "How are you?" I asked. "Alive," he responded. "2 mercenaries neutralized, 1 wounded. The guests scattered, Harrington." "Neutralized permanently." I looked at Vanessa. Her eyes were open but clouded with pain. "Why?" I asked quietly. "We could have built a different life." She smiled weakly. "I became a monster by my own will, Ethan," she whispered. "Maybe I always was one. You just didn't notice." She coughed, and a blood trickle ran from the corner of her mouth. "He lured me with blackmail," she continued. "Compromising photos from the Charity Gala. Said he'd destroy my career if I didn't help him charm you, gain access to the reserve." I listened silently, supporting her head. But then I felt power, strength, adrenaline from the hunt, from having another person's life in your hands. Her eyes momentarily lit with a feverish gleam. I couldn't stop. It's like a drug, Ethan, the most powerful drug. "I could have helped you," I said, not believing my own words. "No," she shook her head. "Some poisons penetrate too deeply into the blood. They can't be extracted anymore." In the distance sounded a helicopter. Help had arrived. Most likely Isaiah had contacted authorities from the neighboring county. "Forgive me," whispered Vanessa, squeezing my hand with bloodied fingers. "But no, part of me always loved you. Just that part wasn't enough." Her eyes closed. Her breathing became irregular. The arriving paramedics took her to the helicopter. While they bandaged me on site, my wound proved superficial. The following weeks passed as if in a fog. Interrogations, testimonies, statements. Materials we collected, phone recordings, Senator Crawford's testimony, surveillance camera footage, became the foundation for a large-scale investigation. The FBI joined after Isaiah, and I handed evidence to Special Agent Claire Morgan, unconnected to corrupted structures. Vanessa survived but received a life sentence for participating in numerous murders. During the trial, she maintained cold dignity, not denying her guilt but showing no remorse, as if part of her still believed she had the right to decide who lived and who died. Harrington's network proved even wider than we'd assumed. Influential politicians, businessmen, celebrities, many were involved in the hunts or knew about them. Some committed suicide rather than face arrest. Others made deals with prosecutors. Still others disappeared, using their connections and wealth. I left the reserve service. Too many memories, too many ghosts. Instead, using compensation received from the government for exposing the criminal network, I acquired Harrington's former hunting lodge. Almost a year has passed since those events. The old bloody temple transformed into a rehabilitation center for veterans with PTSD, a place where they could find peace and understanding, where nightmares from the past gradually receded before nature's beauty and support from others like them. Isaiah became my first assistant. His street fighter experience and natural empathy made him irreplaceable in working with those who'd lost faith in themselves and society. He himself changed, no longer hid his talent for drawing, even began teaching art therapy to our patients. One autumn evening, when the center had quieted and the last rays of sun colored the pine tops gold, I stepped onto the porch for fresh air. On the threshold lay a brown folder that wasn't there an hour ago. Inside, a dossier on a high-ranking Pentagon official, photographs proving his participation in Harrington's hunts, and a note, "Some predators still roam free." I peered into the forest's darkness and noticed a familiar silhouette, one of Harrington's former mercenaries, whom I remembered by his professional bearing and characteristic neck scar. He stepped from the tree shadows just enough for me to recognize him, gave me a military salute, and vanished into the darkness. I stared long at the dossier in my hands, feeling the soldier I'd been for 15 years awakening again within me, the hunter of predators. Isaiah came onto the porch and silently stood beside me. "Starting again?" he asked, nodding at the folder. "Seems it never ended," I replied, leafing through the documents. "Are you with me?" He smiled for the first time in a long while, truly sincerely. "Always, brother, always." In the distance came a wolf's howl, the first predators returning to the reserve after a long absence. Nature restored the natural balance, and we were part of this process. The hunt continued, but now the hunter was me. The end.